Stop
Joe
criticizing
Jackson
Joe
shouldn't
Jackson.
be
Let's remember
criticized
him
but
today. He was a good father. On the
applauded.
morning of Wednesday, June 27, 2018, the man who pulled music out of a steel town in Gary and planted it on every stage in the world took his last breath in Los Angeles. Joe Jackson died at 89 after a battle with cancer. The headlines called him patriarch. The comments called him names. But if you want to understand how the Jackson 5 happened at all, you have to start with Joe, not with the noise around him. Joe was born July 26, 1928 in Fountain Hill, Arkansas. He tried boxing. He tried guitar. None of it paid the bills. So he went to work as a crane operator in the steel mills of Northwest Indiana. That was the world he knew. 12-hour shifts, hard hands, no excuses. Feed 11 children with Rebby, Jackie, Tito, German, Latoya, Marlon, Brandon, Michael, Randy, and Janet. In that house, talent was not a hobby. When Jackie, Tito, and German started playing together as the Jackson Brothers, Joe heard something. He became their manager. Then Marlon and Michael joined, and they became the Jackson 5. Joe didn't wait for a record label to discover them. He booked the gigs. He drove them to amateur competitions. He supervised rehearsals, sessions, and tour. He moved the family from Gary to Los Angeles so they could compete where it mattered. He secured their first record deal with Motown. Later, he managed Janet, Randy, Latoya, and Rebby too. The result? The first group in history to debut with 4 consecutive #1 hits on the Hot 100, 16 top 40 singles, 2 kids who became global icons, Michael and Janet. A family lifted straight out of the steel mills and into worldwide pop superstardom. Even Michael's estate executors, John Branca and John McClain, said it plainly after Joe passed. Joe was a strong man who acknowledged his own imperfections and heroically delivered his sons and daughters from the steel mills of Gary, Indiana, to worldwide pop superstardom. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame named him Best Entertainment Manager of all time in 2002. Yes, Joe was a strict disciplinarian father of 11 children. He admitted he physically punished his children. In interviews, he said it himself. It kept them out of jail and kept them right. In 2013, he told Piers Morgan he was glad he was tough on his kids because I came out with some kids that everybody loved all over the world, and they treated everybody right. That is where the criticism comes from. People read whippings and intense rehearsals, and they stopped there. They call it abuse and they call it wicked. But look at what that discipline actually produced, and look at what Joe was trying to beat back. Gary in the 1960s was not a safe place to be a talented black kid with big dreams. The default paths were the mill, the streets, or nothing. Joe chose a third path, work. He put his sons in rooms with instruments instead of trouble. He set rules, curfews, practice schedules. He demanded professionalism before they were old enough to drive. Was it hard? Yes. Was it soft? No. But soft doesn't survive Motown auditions, doesn't survive 7 shows a week, doesn't survive being 10 years old and the lead singer for the world. Michael himself held an annual Joseph Jackson Day at Neverland Ranch. Latoya wrote after Joe died, "I will always love you. You gave us strength. You made us one of the most famous families in the world. I am extremely appreciative of that." Grandson Randy Jackson Jr. posted, "R.I.P. to the king that made everything possible. I love you, Grandpa." Todd Jackson asked for space to grieve and said his grandfather was loved by our entire family. Some siblings stayed estranged. Some refuted the allegations entirely. That is family. But the record is clear. Without Joe's iron will, there is no Jackson 5. Appreciate Joe, don't reduce him. Criticizing Joe is easy from a phone in 2026. It's harder to imagine being a steel worker in 1965 with 10 kids, watching your sons have a gift, and deciding you will not let that gift die in poverty. Joe didn't have a manual. He had a work ethic. He took what he knew from the mills, show up, drill, repeat, no shortcuts, and he applied it to music. He pushed them to their limits physically and mentally because the industry he was throwing them into had no mercy either. You can call that cruel if you want. Or you can call it what it was. A father who bet everything on his children's talent and won. He took 5 boys from a small house in Indiana and gave them a stage big enough for the planet. He gave Janet the start she needed to become her own superstar. He gave the world a sound that still fills weddings, stadiums, and radio today. So the next time someone says Joe Jackson was just wicked, ask them this. Name one other man who turned a family band into a dynasty, who got 4 straight #1s on debut, who pulled his kids out of Gary and put them in the Rock Hall. You won't find many. Joe Jackson died with more sunsets behind him than ahead. He knew it. The sun rises when the time comes, and it sets when the time comes. His time built something that didn't die with him. Appreciate him for that. Not for being perfect, for being the reason the Jackson 5 existed at all.